Hello and welcome to the Unbundled Attorney Mastermind Podcast. My name is Dave Aarons and I'm the founder and CEO of Unbundled Attorney. In this podcast, we interview our unbundled attorneys as well as the leading experts in the industry to identify the best practices for converting leads into paying clients and how to ethically and profitably deliver unbundled legal services and other affordable options in your practice. To learn more about how our exclusive unbundled leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com. All right, welcome to the Unbundled Attorney Mastermind Podcast. We are very excited and pleased to be back. It's been a couple years since we were able to do these in-person interviews, and we're really excited to be in Indianapolis, Indiana with Aaron Harshman and Rochelle, who are joining us, both of which have been working with Unbundled Attorney for many years. And so we're going to be unpacking today both how to work family law leads and practice family law in an affordable way, and in addition, how to provide affordable services in the practice of criminal law. So we're going to be able to do some compare and contrast of those two interviews, of those two practice types. And just a quick reminder that you can watch these. If you're listening to this episode on your podcast player, you can also watch the episode. If you go to unbundledattorney.com/podcast, you will see the video version of this episode as these are all filmed. And we also have it on our YouTube channel. So you can watch the episode or listen to it. But Aaron and Rochelle, thanks for making the time and welcome to the show.
Thanks to be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So maybe a good place to start is just to share one of the things that is unique about the two of yours practice is you are a married couple, yet you have your own unique practices as well. And that was by design for various different reasons, lifestyle and so forth. So maybe you could just share, how it is that you guys both practice in terms of, what you focus on in your practice, what you focus on in yours. And maybe you can share why you guys decided to have the two separate practices for yourselves personally.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I guess I can go first. So my main practice areas are in the areas of family law and just general civil litigation. My firm has 5 attorneys, and we kind of split between civil, criminal defense, and then some like business transactional work. And so we had kind of merged and started our firm back in 2018. And so I know when you started talking about going solo, didn't necessarily want to put all those eggs in one basket. But I think it worked out well, gave you a little more autonomy, too, because obviously when you've got 4 partners, there's a lot more, moving pieces with that.
Yeah, for me, it was really great to see you start a firm and then get to do my own firm after that, and knowing what pieces kind of worked in place.
So you just battle tested through her.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
well,
that worked great.
I was the guinea pig.
Well, we were setting up her firm initially when she was just a solo practitioner. We worked a lot on that, even though I was practicing in government practice at the time. So we had both set up that firm together to get her rolling, and then we got to do that again when we got my firm rolling. And it allowed us to kind of do different things and to do things a little bit differently. And for me to just completely have just a criminal law firm all to myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you guys have 2 separate practices. Aaron, I know you have some experience doing family law. We worked together on delivering family leads for a while, and then you've switched over up till recently on focusing on criminal. And for you do, obviously both in your practice and so forth. So what will be really helpful is just to start to unpack the differences in the ways when you were doing family law, how you would approach working the leads and the types of service options that you would provide to the clients. As for you as well, when you're working, because right now you're focused just on family law, you haven't taken the criminal leads yet, hey?
Right.
So, and we can kind of just unpack your process when you're working with family law, and how you would structure the relationships, the process by which you would work with an incoming client to engage with the client. There's some differences in the way that you would prospect with, someone that's in a family law case and is considering hiring your services versus someone that's dealing with criminal charges. And the urgency, the time factor, the type of information they need, the way in which to engage with them is going to be different. And so it's going to be really helpful for us to just draw those parallels and also contrast the differences that make enrolling clients and delivering services in an affordable way differently for these 2 practice areas. So maybe what might be helpful, Aaron, is just to start, and then you can kind of share how this is reflected in the way you've been working the family laws, is just start by describing your process for delivering family law services to the leads. From the beginning of, how you would usually focus on getting in touch with the clients, whether you meet with them in person, what the process was for doing so. And then from there, we can talk about some of the service options and then draw some comparisons to criminal.
Sure. So what I would do is, for my family law leads, you get the notification from Unbundled, have a scheduling call in order to get them in my office. I was trying to do everything pretty much in office, and I could have done more virtual, but really I wanted to get everyone in office. I was doing everything I could to kind of overcome the trust barriers that they had, because family law is high trust, in my opinion. So when I'm doing that, I'm meeting with them, and I'm trying to find the smallest thing that I can do for them that they need done. Just that one point where I can listen to them and I can say, you might need 5 things, but I can definitely do this one thing, and that's where we should start. So if it's a divorce, it might just be drafting, and I'm just going to offer drafting. And then as soon as I'm done drafting, I'm going to have, as a part of that engagement, a last meeting with them, and I'll say, here's your paperwork. Now we have to talk about filing. You can have me do it. You can do it yourself. We can walk you through it. Or, we can talk about the other things that you also want done. Okay. And so, since I viewed it as a high trust practice, I'm looking to overcome their indecision and their anxiety about the transaction. And so the easiest way for me to do that is to offer them one thing at an affordable price so they get a taste, and then we can move from there.
And why did you feel for family law? I mean, and most of the attorneys would agree that having a face-to-face contact with someone that's dealing with a family law challenge, custody, visitation, divorce, something like that, really does help. And you mentioned trust and comfort level. Were those some of the factors for you as well in wanting to have an opportunity to meet with them in person? Because what was the main reason for that?
I want to meet with them in person because I want to meet them is one thing. I want them to feel heard and listened to. And just kind of in my experience, there's times when it's fine and appropriate, but until I meet them in person or until I see their face and they see mine, I know that I'm the drive-by attorney speaking to them through the speaker box. And so I need to overcome that because I know that's how other attorneys are talking to them. And so as much as I can, I want to give them the time and experience so they know everything's going to be all right. We can take care of this. This is something we can do for you. And again, the combination of that and everything else communicates trust so that we can let them know they'll be fine and that we can take care of it for them.
Right. Okay. And Rochelle, is it pretty similar in terms of the way you would begin a relationship with a client? Is you would usually have them come in the office, or do you tend to do a lot of your enrollments over the phone?
I do things a little bit differently. Aaron's way better about doing them more in person. I typically will offer like a virtual option so you can meet face to face or just phone call. I tend to convert pretty well on the phone. So I have found that honestly, phone calls for me work just fine. So I give them now the option. I had given them the options of in-person, virtual, or phone. I found that most of mine were going virtual or on the phone. So that's usually where mine land is, in one of those two arenas, and honestly mostly just on the phone. Very few even ask for the remote now. So now mine's just mainly all phone.
Do you tend to take I mean, it'll be helpful, I think, because Aaron, you've worked with criminal leads versus the family law, and there's different amount of urgency, there's a different amount of necessity to get an answer, to know that they have someone on their side, like that day, that night. And we'll talk about the what they need, right? There's a difference in the needs for that person, to have someone they know is on their side, right? But when you're doing the family law consultations, I would imagine you're still having to develop that relationship, develop that comfort, and I'll share, Erin has said that, she's really, really good at doing it on the phone because she's like a teddy bear and people feel really comfortable and they just, they cozy up and they just feel really comfortable with you, which is a strong suit of yours, right? Which is talent, which some lawyers don't have, and so it's great that you have that capacity to connect with folks. How do you go about doing that on the phone consultation? Do you take a good amount of time? If you were to try to unpack how it is you're able to develop that rapport and that trust through just a phone call. Maybe there's something you can, maybe you can kind of check some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I feel like I try not to use like a lot of legalese. I try to use more like kind of common, just normal conversational language. And I try to figure out ways, like I either try to throw in some jokes or try to, be more like they're talking to a friend than they are talking to a lawyer. Because I feel like, especially in my world of family law or even civil litigation generally, people aren't coming to you on a good day. They're coming to you on a bad day most of the time. Now, the adoptions and those kinds of things are some of the fun things we get to do, but those are not the majority of our cases. So trying to find something that you can, hear what they say, empathize with them, like for instance, like when I get to the fee part, and I hear my associate now use the same language I use, and it's kind of funny to listen to, but I will always say, now for the fun part of this conversation, I know the part you've been waiting for is the fees part of this. I know we've talked through your case. I've kind of given you some ideas of what we can do, but now for the fun part, and kind of just reassuring them that like, look, you didn't plan for this, and I'm here to help you through it. As long, when we come up with like payment plans and things like that, we talk about their budget and like, what does that look like? And I don't want it to put you where you can't afford your bills. How can we talk through that? And trying to feel like meet them where they're at, but in a very like relational way. Attorneys can kind of be scary and intimidating. And so I really try to make it seem like they're talking to a friend who just happens to also have answers to their questions too. But, I feel like that has gone a long way to make me have a better rapport with them on the phone, so I don't need to bring them as much into the office. Because I feel like usually by the end of that phone call, I feel like they feel heard and listened to, and at least like I'm never rushing them off the phone. I try really, it puts me behind sometimes, but I feel like that's a big thing for me. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm up on my 15-minute or whatever it is," and it's like, it's okay. Like, do you have questions? Like, I'm here to answer those. I try really hard not to rush them off the phone. I get a lot of comments, I feel like, from thank you just for taking time to talk to me about this, because I think attorneys do tend to rush people off the phones, and I get that and I understand that, but at the same time, like, these people are calling with problems and like this is a big deal to them, so they don't want to feel rushed. And so I do feel like having that a little bit longer phone call, even if it puts you a little behind on your other ones, is still worth it.
Especially if you're talking to someone that you're in a good position to serve,
right?
And I would imagine, and maybe we can talk about just the general structure to the best of your ability to think about, like, well, I'll usually let them talk for a little bit, ask them some questions, really get to the root of it, try to figure out what I can do for them. And then, so maybe we could just break down that process a little bit. But I would imagine that you're also taking some time at the end to really talk through how you can solve whatever financial challenges that they're having, right? And creating some safe space for them to be honest about what they can do, letting them know that, hey, we're here to work with you in whatever way we can. We don't want to put you behind the back. We know you didn't plan for this. It's the phrase that you use there. So can you share maybe like just the general phases of a consultation for yourself? You may not have thought about it in kind of the mechanics, so to speak. It's something you probably do quite naturally. But what do you focus on your phone consultation? You mentioned that you do take a little bit more time with the folks, which I would imagine would be the case because you have to build a little bit rapport. You don't have that opportunity to see them face to face or have them sit down and serve them a glass and talk, talk a little bit about the nuances and so forth. So yeah, see if you can describe that in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first get on the call, I try to be very intentional about using their name, their first name. I don't use Mr. and Mrs. I think that kind of comes across too formal sometimes. I know people have their own beliefs on that, but I try to use their first name. Introduce who I am. I taken a look at their intake already, so I know generally what their issue is. And so I usually will be like, hey, I see you're calling about this issue. This is what I kind of see what's going on. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think is going on and what you're hoping to accomplish? And I'll let them talk through that a little bit. One thing I always have them talk about too are goals. So with every client or potential client I sit down with, I'll hear them out and then I'll basically say, okay, so what I'm hearing you're saying is this. So what would goals would be this, this, and this. Are there any other goals that you would want to make sure that we're accomplishing, during your case, and have them just kind of talk through that? Because I feel like you get lost in the weeds sometimes of their story. And I think sometimes they don't even know what their goals are necessarily, other than it's got to change. And so helping them hone in on what are their goals, because it also helps later when they're like, well, I didn't like this, this, and this. I'm like, what were your goals? Like your goals were you wanted to modify child support, you wanted more parenting time. Did we accomplish those things? Yes, we did. So like this was successful. Even if it felt like you didn't get everything you wanted, you got your main goals.
That's right.
So it helps to stay focused a little bit too, because I think that is the hard part with these intakes. Like family drama is drama. And so they could talk for hours about these things. And so trying to hone them in on goals. Okay, so I heard your issue. Let's talk about those goals. And then usually I'll try to get some just general information too. Some people have their staff do that. I end up tending to do most of that myself. We do have follow-up intakes, so we have them fill out sometimes. But a lot of times I'm just like, okay, so tell me about your kids. What are their names? What are their ages? Like, let's talk through that. And then kind of get to, after we've talked through that, we've talked about their goals, how we can help, like what next steps would be. Then I kind of go into, and now, for the fun part. And so kind of talk through that with them. And the same language you were talking about earlier, we talk about the fact that, you didn't plan for this. Even people who make a lot of money oftentimes don't have a lot of money just laying around. Yeah. So, even people who are high earners, you can't assume that they just have, $5,000 laying around. For some people that require that for a retainer.
And so you'll kind of be understanding about the situation.
Yeah.
This is not
well, and I try to be very open about not shaming them either for that, because because I feel like sometimes people, they'll be like, well, I can't afford an attorney, or they're kind of embarrassed that they don't have it, depending on what kind of tier they come from. Or they feel like attorneys have expectations even, of people who are lower income. And so I try to put them at ease with that and just say across the board, like, no matter how much you make, a lot of people don't have just extra cash laying around for this. And so I kind of give them a normal quote for like, hey, this is kind of what full service would look like. If that's kind of what you're looking for, I can break it down if I need to into other portions. But if you want full service, this is what it looks like. What could you do up front today? And kind of let them say what they could. Sometimes they don't have an idea. And so I usually will say, well, we ask for half up front usually, and then we come up with a payment plan on the remainder. And then I'll give them my spiel of, but I'm not looking to make you not be able to pay your rent or your bills. Like, I don't want to have to come hound you for payments. Like, I want it to be something realistic that you can do. Because I don't want to waste your time trying to make you have to redo payments every time when they fail. And so I try to make it really kind of let them own what that payment plan is going to be. Yeah. And I have yet to really have one that wasn't something I could go for. As long as it's an automatic payment plan, I don't care for the most part. Yeah. And then at the end, I kind of just say, like, we went through all that. Like, here's what our onboarding looks like. Here's how we'll send this to you to sign. Like, what questions do you have for me? And most of the time, by the time we get done, they don't have a lot. But, there might be some that you haven't hit on, and they'll usually ask those then. And, then just say, I'll send these things out to you. And that's kind of the end of that conversation.
Awesome. And how long would you imagine your typical consultation, because you're also taking the time to kind of really work through where they're at financially and what they can do, and having a conversation around what makes sense, structuring a payment plan, and then obviously sending along the materials for them to sign and so forth, and getting to the root of that, right? To really understand what works for them.
Right. I
would imagine it's not maybe a 10, 15 minute call. It's probably a little bit longer, right? Because you're also taking the time to build a connection and listen to them, talk about what the next steps are going to be and so forth. So do you have a sense for how long most of the calls take? And
I would say most of them are probably between 20 and 25 minutes. Some of them push 30. Because we've had to adjust, like, we use Calendly for all of my intake calls, and even my current clients too. Like, that's how they get on my calendar. So we've had to adjust the buffer between some of my calls because I wasn't keeping it.
Were you booking them as 15s?
Well, no, they knew better. My staff knew better than that. Yeah, no, the 15 minutes didn't work. I'm always excited with myself if I can get it under 20 minutes. That's a good intake for me, is if I can just cut to the chase, but in a nice way. If it could be sub 20, but usually it's probably 25 to 30. So they now know to book 35 minutes on my calendar versus, so just so I can get through all that.
Well, and that's the thing is I think you're right. Like, a lot of attorneys are trying to qualify, right? And try to, like, well, can you, they right at the beginning of the conversation, they're talking about money and resources and so forth, or, they're focusing on how do I sell this client, how do I close and so forth, rather than allowing the space and the time to really hear out the client, really what's going on. And that's what builds the trust. They feel heard. You said that at the beginning,
Right.
which I think is the biggest key. If they don't feel heard, then they're not ready to talk about money.
Right. Because why would they trust you
first.
with it otherwise? Yeah.
Yes. And Anthony talked about this on one of our most recent podcasts as well, is that like he waits for them in some ways to ask about the money. He asks their questions and so forth, waits and makes sure, because he knows if they're asking him about the money, that they felt heard. Right.
Which is a good way to do that too.
Yeah. It's like, it's checking for like, have I really listened to this person? Do we know what their primary goal is? Are we on the same page here on what needs to be done? Do they believe they're on the same page? You've checked in with them. Okay, cool. So this is the next steps. Now let's talk about the fun part, like you said.
Right.
And just figure out how we can make this happen for you financially.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that would be a family consultation. And then obviously we talked about doing it more in person. Would there be any variances for you, Aaron, when you were doing in-person meetings in terms of the way you approach those meetings? In terms of, I would imagine if you're doing it in person, that the difference might be that you have them fill out the fee agreement and take care of payment right then, as opposed to like on a phone consultation, you might send the fee agreement for them to sign and send the payment link. I would imagine you probably don't process them on the spot, so to speak. You would.
I don't usually know, but it might be a good idea sometimes to do that. But most of the time, they usually do a pretty good job of when I send it out, then they'll process afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anything to add from your experience, Aaron?
Other egg.
Just talking about Anthony.
Yeah, just talk about him.
Yeah. Fair. In terms of what your process was when you were working and delivering family law services before you made the switch to criminal.
I mean, it's hard for me to divide out the whole process that was taking place there, because my goal was they're in my office. I'm going to talk to them until we both know what's going on, until all their questions are answered. Yeah. To the scope that we're allowed, that I'm going to answer them right now, because a lot of times you have to say, we're not going to know that until later. We're not going to know that until later, but this is what we can do right now. And then basically, once we're at that point of understanding of here's what we can do right now, where are we going? Mm-hmm. That's usually the point where they're getting started with you. And so, it's a little bit, I find it easier, and Rochelle's great. That's why I married her. I would have married her off the phone.
Fair enough. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm probably a little harder sell on the phone, so that's why I need the in person. So yeah.
We met in law school. I was not. He did not meet me on the phone.
No, that's true.
Yes. Was it a phone date?
No, it was not a phone date.
It wasn't a phone arranged a phone arranged marriage.
No. Goodness. All right. Okay. So we've kind of unpacked the family. I also want to just, if you could touch briefly on, you talked about just finding that one thing you could do for the client, right? And it'd be nice to kind of highlight some of the examples of the one thing you might look at doing. And also we can contrast that with the fact that we can't do that in criminal law,
sure,
right?
Sure.
Because that's limited scope, unbundled legal services, and just doing one phase of the matter where I'm just assigning a limited scope retainer agreement and here's the service we're going to do. So could you give some examples of service options that you would start a family law client when you were working those family law leads? And then we can talk about how we can't do that in criminal.
Yeah. So 3 easy examples I can think of are, you need a divorce, I can draft the petition.
Yep.
Okay. A second is you have a hearing coming up where the other person is trying to get something from you or say you did something wrong. You need defense at that one hearing.
Yes.
Okay. Another was someone came in and they were in the divorce process and there was discovery. They needed help putting together their discovery.
Yes. Those
are things I can sit down with, plan for, and maybe attend one hearing and get done. Mm-hmm. So those are things where I can say, this is your immediate need, right? And then work with them on that one thing. And then from there, some of the clients I continued on with and did other things with. Some I very intentionally did not continue on with because the first thing didn't work in terms of us still having a good relationship at the end of it because of either their expectations or sometimes just who they were. But in all cases, I was able to do the one thing that they asked me to do, and it worked out.
Right.
Yeah. And so paid up front for those, and it worked.
Right. And so there's a couple pieces there. Did you find it helpful for you to be able to begin the relationship on a limited scope basis because you didn't necessarily have to continue along and you could still end on good terms and for whatever reason, not continue to represent that client because you'd only agree to begin or help them with what they needed right then and there.
Right. For me, I like small stuff. I like small projects. I like being able to know I got that one thing done.
Yes.
And then if they really needed the help, I would have always a sit down meeting and say, okay, here's where we are now. Like we're done with that part. Here's where we are now. This is the next thing coming down the pike. And being able to say, here is how I can help you with it. And to kind of contrast what you did, I didn't have prices set out beforehand. Because sometimes you learn things about clients along the way that help you price things
That's fair.
for the work it's going to be later that you wouldn't have known about them before.
By beginning with one small service, you get a better sense than you might be able to on just a consultation, for example, on what the working relationship will look and feel like, and just the amount of time it might take, just based on how often they call and so forth.
Right.
And I think that's the one hard part about family law is the flat fee on that and trying to figure out how much time, because some cases just inherently take a lot more time. So that would be one helpful thing to kind of vet just what kind of level of engagement they need.
Yeah, a lot of people think they have a simple divorce.
And it's agreed upon. Everything's agreed upon.
Everything's agreed upon until it's not.
But who's going to have the kids? Well, we haven't talked about that part yet.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, interesting.
Who's getting the kids? Who's getting the car?
Who's getting the money?
Yeah. Where's Fido going to live?
Yeah.
Yes.
We've agreed that we're getting divorced.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Kind of contrasting that with, criminal law, most jurisdictions won't let you jump in and out of a case. And a lot of, one thing I'm always thinking about is the judges I'm practicing in front of, what are they going to think if I'm jumping in and out of a case too? Yes. So you're really assuming that you're going to be in there for the long haul most of the time on most of the work that you're doing out of criminal. So when I'm doing those, obviously I'm also taking time to vet it at the beginning with the person I'm working with. But I'm knowing that I'm going to have a longer term relationship with that person. And so making sure that I have terms that make sense are always going to be, it's really important for those terms to be locked down.
What would you say was the most common service package? Because I would imagine you've got the drafting, you've got appearance, you've got discovery, but those would be all a la carte. But sometimes I would imagine that's packaged, right? I'll draft, I'll file, and I'll do appearance and so forth. What would you say was the most common limited scope service option that you would begin a relationship with when you were first meeting with folks? And what would be a typical price point?
Yeah, so the most common was, let's say, divorce. So for I had automated drafting software that was able to do a lot for me, and the petitions are very easy to do, in my opinion, in Indiana.
What was the drafting software you used?
I used LawYaw.
LawYaw?
Yeah.
They've been on the podcast as well.
Yeah. And so I would use them. I was able to get a complete set of documents to get started. Post intake, it would probably take me 15 minutes to get everything drafted. Okay. So I was quoting in most cases around $400 for that document set. And then there was a filing fee you pay in Indiana, which I would be incurring if I was filing it for them. Okay. So that's when I'd have the sit down meeting and I'd say, okay, so you are $400 in right now. Either we can spend this last half hour for me to talk to you and show you how to file things, which is if you're going to get divorced, you're going to have to know how to e-file in Indiana. Okay, so that was the value add service at the end of it. Or I can keep working this for you. I can file this part and get it served for you. And that's going to bump us up to the $750 range. Okay, so I can cover the fee and still get some extra money for it. And then, so I was all in for up to filing and serving for them at the $750 mark. If they wanted a first hearing, it was probably going to be another, depending on kids or not, it would be another $700 or $1,000 after that.
Right.
So
kind
of
$1,500 if they're doing the file and appear versus $750 for just filing and doing the serving.
Right.
$400 or so just for drafting and the other person.
Right. And I would say what most people did was they got me to file it for them. And then I didn't, they might have re-engaged me later, 60 days later when an issue popped up.
Yes.
But in a lot of cases they were good with that. And a lot of times what they were re-engaging me with was, I would, for some of my clients, they would say, okay, I want to get this settled and we think we have terms down. I'd say, okay, I'm going to give you a form document. I want you guys to fill it out together. And then they're going to come back to me, and I would charge them for providing that form, them sending it back to me and finalizing it in such a way that they could sign off to each other.
Right. And I would imagine, you had mentioned because of the fact that you're using LawYaw, that you could deliver that service very efficiently.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
In less than an hour, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. And so I would imagine that because you were doing the flat rate, you were benefiting by having that system of automation to be able to deliver it in that way.
Right.
Whereas if you could imagine not having a document automation process and then delivering that service, it would probably take maybe 2, 3, 4 hours.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
Maybe. And so the fee structure would have to be completely different without
Right.
that kind of system in place. Okay?
And to even to make it more clear, my assistant was pretty much doing even the LawYaw side of it. So we were doing the intake with them when I was talking to them.
Yep.
I was handing that over to her. She was completing the document for my review, and then it was getting filed from there. So
Right.
And that's how we operate too. So we use LawYaw because he got me started on that as well. And so now for like a divorce case, I mean, it probably takes my staff to draft almost every document I think we would need on a full divorce case. I mean, maybe 30 minutes. It's inputting stuff into our system, running the documents, like discovery is ready to go. At least the basic version, all of our pleadings, proposed orders, all of that's in there and just ready to go. So yeah, and then I have my staff do that. Like, I feel like it's been a huge help to be able to get stuff out the door much faster on those flat fee things, because obviously the name of the game on those flat fees is what's the least amount of time I can spend on it, still giving them the best service.
Yeah.
But then just maximizes your hourly time on it.
That's right. Yeah, and then you can offer a flat rate of $750 or $1,000 or $500, something like that.
Right.
And your effective hourly rate on that is, if you're only having to spend 30 minutes to enroll the client, 30 minutes of your own time, is $570 an hour, right? Minus filing fee in your case,
Right.
And you could still do really well, right? And so that's more than what your standard hourly rate is, right?
Right.
And so being able to lead with a service option, I think a lot of attorneys think of this as some kind of lower cost lawyering or discount lawyering when they do limited scope. When in reality, it actually ends up for the per hour time you're putting into getting services out the door, if you take advantage of some of the technology that's now available through LawYaw and some of the different solutions, it's a game changer. And it makes delivering these services a la carte very profitable financially and viable for attorneys to provide that as the starting service.
And I think sometimes too, it's also helpful for clients to know that there's an end to my fees. Because I think sometimes too for clients, and I think it all comes down to their risk tolerance, but some people, they're scared of how much that's going to be too. So to know I just have to pay this amount and that's the fee. I think for them sometimes lets them rest easier, knowing like, okay, this is something I can do, versus, when you get that first bill, like, and all of a sudden you realize that retainer you just paid is gone after your first hearing. And all of a sudden we're back to, sorry, you've got nothing in your retainer because, we just spent 7 hours on your case litigating this at a hearing. So I also think that from the client side too, it makes them know exactly what they're biting off and they know that they can do that. So I think it's helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit smaller hill to climb to start.
Yeah.
Right. It's just it's a clear picture. They know how, what they have to come up with. It's usually going to be a smaller number.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a limited scope service. We're talking $500, $1,000, $1,500 at the high end for what you were describing, versus $2,500 to $5,000.
Right.
And that's a big difference when it comes to having a client being able to say yes today to moving forward with your services relative to anybody else, relative to any other firm they may be talking to.
Right. And I think too, when you do those smaller scale, so when you flat fee it, I do think it makes it easier too to set them up on like a payment plan. So like their cost to entry is usually much lower. So if say the project's going to be $500 to do the whole package for the documents, okay, so $250 today to start.
Sure.
The other $250 in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 4 weeks when you get paid. So like that's not as big of a deal either too, when it's a little bit smaller there and you just don't give them the documents until they've paid you in full. But at least then they feel like they've gotten the ball rolling, things like that. But I think that makes it easier too.
Yeah, and it's paid upon delivery, or delivery upon
right.
payment,
and they all understand that too. Yeah.
Right.
But I know they just love being able to say, oh my gosh, I've got an attorney on board. We're moving forward. Like, got this, they just feel good to be able to say they're doing something with it.
Yes.
I think it's helpful to them too.
Yeah. One thing that we often forget is legal services are emotional for the people who are dealing with them, even more so than, I mean, we look at them as legal problems. That's how we've been trained. They view them as emotional problems, and they need to know that one thing that will make them feel better. And sometimes that's, I hired an attorney to do something for me.
Yes.
That gives them relief.
Yeah, well, I can't.
It takes that up and puts them over
Right.
here. So
Absolutely.
it's
Right.
like, I know I have someone working on this for me.
Now they're sharing their problem.
Yeah, they're
Rather
excited.
than-
They don't have to deal with it all by themselves.
Yeah,
anymore.
they're not alone anymore. So again, there's the emotional side to particularly in family law and criminal law. I mean, there's heavy emotional sides to those. And so part of what we're doing is we're trying to provide emotional relief through legal services.
Yes.
And that's difficult for a lot of attorneys to grapple with because they think they have to win. They think they have to, be that. But the client, more than anything else, just needs you to be there.
Yeah.
And they want the person who will be there.
And one language I feel like I've heard you on calls, and you've probably heard me on calls too. Like, I'm big on team. Like, we're part of your team. And so you'll hear me use that language, and you'll hear my staff use it too, of like, here's your team. This is who it comprises of. Like, call any of us. We're happy to help. Like, and that kind of thing. I feel like too, knowing that they've got people on their side, making them feel like, okay, I've got somebody who's looking out for me. I think is also helpful too. Like, during those conversations when you're having, like, how do you make that rapport? Making sure they know you're on, like, we've got a team here to help you. It's not just me. My staff is valuable too. Like, be nice to them. They're here to help you too. Like, but like having a team behind people, I think sometimes helps them feel better too, of knowing that, they've got me, so we're in good hands.
Yes. And, you had mentioned, Aaron, that, you kind of like doing the one-off types of services because, you get that one thing done, you deliver that, and then if it evolves into something else, then great. If not, then it's okay. A lot of, other lawyers might say, we've had a lot of lawyers come on the show that have utilized limited scope as a starting point to help them enroll more clients, get them started with the services, and then the relationship transitions to full representation or additional services from there, right? And it's just, in some ways, a way for the client to get to know you a little bit better, have a service that they can say yes to. It's kind of like you're giving them an offer they can't refuse, like a Godfather offer we've talked about before. I'm going to give you an offer you can't refuse, okay? How about $500 down and a $1,500 service? Okay, that sounds pretty good relative to the three other lawyers that quoted me $3,500 to start. So it's a really easy way for them to get started, and then they can experience what it's like working with you and having a team, like you had said, and you have an opportunity to work with them, and then they're going to feel a lot more comfortable when it comes to that next stage of the case. Okay, well, yeah, I really enjoyed working with Mr. Harshman, and so it makes sense for me at this point to want to transition a relationship to additional services. It's almost a natural evolution.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. I'd agree with that. It's obviously you've built up that next level of trust, and it's very common that they'll ask you about full fee, or they'll ask you, about full representation, or they'll get you to contract that one other thing. My personal preference, just the way I like doing it, I usually just try to get them for one more. Because I always liked doing the one more. I probably for my own mental health, and because it kept my billing to a minimum. Because I'm kind of a born and bred criminal guy, so I don't like billing out all my time as much as I'd rather just get things done for my clients. Because I kind of think of an efficiency mindset. How can I get this done the fastest possible, rather than worrying about billing it and my 0.1s. So
the transportation fees for the top floor or the bottom floor.
Yes, right. How much time did I think about that case last night? Yeah.
More time than we could bill for.
Right.
Okay. So we've talked about this, and just the power of limited scope, being able to offer that as a flat rate and deliver service that, when leveraged with properly with technology, can make it a lot more efficient and a lot more profitable to deliver as a service. And you're obviously able to engage with a client on a limited scope basis because you have the ethical support from the bar to be able to provide just some service, because as bar associations would agree, it's better to help, in their opinion and the opinion of the legal industry, it's better to provide some clients with some help rather than no help at all.
Right.
And so the very shift in that ethical environment has enabled attorneys to be able to help folks that don't necessarily have $3,000 to $5,000 and can't necessarily commit to full representation. Right. And so it's a really powerful tool for us to provide legal services to folks that would otherwise be able to afford an attorney. And as I'm sure in many of the examples when you worked with clients, when you did the one service and that was it, one of the reasons they may not have continued is they may not be able to afford the next phase of full representation, but at least they had an attorney there to draft their documents, give them the advice, get it filed right, and not make mistakes based on procedure or lack of knowledge.
Right.
Okay. As a pro se litigant. Right. So it's been really wonderful to see the impact that limited scope has had in the family law arena. Now we're doing generation for criminal leads, and still have the same mission, right? Providing affordability and accessibility of legal services across North America, and trying to approach providing services to people that are facing criminal charges in a way that's also going to be affordable for the average, lower middle income family, right? Yeah. Without necessarily having the same capacities ethically to limit the scope of involvement in a criminal case.
Right.
So maybe what we could do is just talk about what those differences are. Maybe we can talk a little bit about just criminal courts and so forth, and why maybe limited scope hasn't been something that's been doable there. And then let's talk about some of the different ways in which we can approach clients that are dealing with criminal cases, so that we can offer services to folks that may not be in a similar position that a family law client is, that doesn't have the thousands of dollars available if they got pulled over on after a late night or something like that.
Yeah. So as far as kind of the issue with in my experience, judges don't want you getting in and out of cases as much. Okay. Yeah. And there's been a lot of as efficient or as great as it looks like it might be, someone just reviewing plea agreements or someone just trying to cover the one bond hearing, there could be some measure in that, but the judges and attorneys I've worked with are always going to view that a little sideways. Okay. Sure. Yeah. And that's just kind of the state of the legal market
across the entire country.
Yeah. That's just the state of the market right now.
Yes.
What I think is available in order to make these services available, because in my experience, Unbundled is very good at finding people who think they can't afford attorneys, but actually can. Mm-hmm. It's people who are looking and they know they have some means. They just haven't found that point of access yet.
Yes.
And so I think the place where we can normally meet them on the criminal law world as a point of access is for us to say, low down payment, something in the 20 or 25% range, and then leveraging the technology for us to start doing automatic payments from day one, to make it an automatic thing, an automatic recurring payment system.
Yes.
If anything ever starts going sideways, you have a very early indication of what's happening there. But for the most part, if it's ingrained in and if they trust you, you're going to get paid along the course of the case. It takes a little bit of knowledge about how long things take to resolve. It takes a little bit of knowledge of, obviously, criminal law attorneys are really good at flat feeing their cases, pretty much how everyone does it. But sometimes it involves the extra skill of breaking up into phases where you are. In some places, they can break up initial representation. Some places can add in discovery, and then some people trial prep.
Yes.
And so if you're able to do all two of those or all three of those, and just say, this part of the case is going to cost this and no further unless we get to that next part.
Right.
That's a way to make it.
Most commonly, it would be like up to trial.
Up to for me, it's usually up to trial.
Yes.
After confirmation for trial.
Yes.
And those are the two phases. And you need to have your money in place for that last phase before you continue on to that phase. So that's normally what we're looking at, and that's what I was doing when I was quoting. Is just be the guy who was willing to hear them. Be the guy who said, I am willing to hear out all the resources you've had, all the resources you have in order to pay for this case, and then zero in on a plan with them together that will work. Yeah.
So you were usually willing to start for a little bit less, if they were on some kind of payment plan.
Yeah. Again, my experience of things, most people have who are coming from leads don't have an attorney out there that they trust anywhere.
Yes.
And it's not that people have no money. It's that people don't have any money for an attorney they don't trust.
Yes.
And
you
so,
said that before. That, the reason you're getting the lead is that person doesn't have an attorney they can trust, that can turn to yet. Or that if they have talked to an attorney that they would love to trust, maybe they wanted $10,000 up front and they couldn't do it.
Right.
So they still don't have someone they can trust that also, is going to be able to bridge the gap for them. Eh?
Right. So in my experience, you're making that entry point. You're being clear to them about expectations. You're setting them up on a doable plan, and that it net positive. So yeah.
Yeah, and you guys have talked about automated payment plans, automated recurring billing payments. We had Amy Porter come on the show, who's the former CEO of LawPay, and she talked about the technology. And I've always been extremely enthusiastic about what LawPay did for the legal industry in terms of being able to have a system that can have funds go into a trust account or operating account, and also that you can set up a recurring billing payment plan in accordance with whenever the person's getting paid, the frequency that they get paid, and in accordance with what they can afford on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis, and have the ability to draft that payment, as opposed to sending an invoice and leaving it in the client's hands every time to have to go in, make the payment, and do the thing, right?
Right.
As opposed to something where you can they know it's budgeted for a specific amount, and it's coming out each check and so forth, and it's taken care of, and they know as long as they take care of that fee, and that comes out of their account as properly, and they have the funds there, that they know that they have representation ongoing. Okay. So can you guys talk about just briefly about how having a system like that has changed the flexibility or the confidence that you would have, or the types of service options that you would now offer because you have this type of payment solution available to you in your firm?
Yeah, I know I'm much more willing to start for a lot less if I have that in place, because I know that, the nice thing is, even after the case is done, it's passive revenue that's just coming in on these cases that you've already worked, maybe a year ago. So we're Clio people. We use Clio, which
Clio payments, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously that works with LawPay, it's powered by LawPay. So, but having some kind of system that's in place that can A, run the payments, and B, also does the invoicing, applying those to your payments, I think is huge. We had LawPay running separate from Clio for a little while, and that was a nightmare. So because then we had to manually input all of it. So when it just runs straight through Clio, through LawPay, that was a huge factor. And I feel like our accounts receivable have gone down because, again, it's very common that I'm talking to my staff saying, hey, call this client, get them set up on another payment plan. Their payments are being declined. So, and maybe we set them up on $25 a week or $25 every other week. I don't care. I just want them to be paying towards it. Because if they've got some skin in the game and they're at least trying, I'm willing to keep trying to work with them as long as they're trying to make payments on their outstanding bills. So that's been huge for us because I feel like, again, most people, even if it's lower, they're willing to put themselves on payment plans. So it might take a while for them to pay it off, but they're paying, which I know has been huge for me.
And the average payment is probably, for family, it depends on what needs to be done, but probably $150, $200 a week, somewhere in there?
Yeah, so
$100 a week,
somewhere about $100, I would say $100 to $150 a week, or 200 to...
So about $500 to $600 a month?
Yeah, usually right around there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Some of my folks that are on Social Security are a little bit less. I do tend to get a fair number of those as clients, which I love them as clients because the nice thing is they do have consistent income, but you get paid once a month, and it might be a little less, but they're willing to pay for it, or over time. I've found that actually those tend to be some of the most valued clients in terms of, they're going to try to make sure you get paid.
They appreciate the work because I would imagine
they know they're
unlimited.
unlimited.
Might look down on
they
their
do, and I
situation,
think get turned away just because a lot of times one of the questions we ask as attorneys is, "Are you employed? Where are you working?" Those kinds of things.
Well, I'm on a fixed income on disability. Oh, bye.
Right. People just assume they can't afford it, but they can. Yeah. They just have to make it in smaller payments. And obviously, they're not somebody who's going to go in and out of employment because I've got that with clients. They don't have a job, so their payments are declining because they don't have any income coming in. So I think that's a missed market group actually for a lot of attorneys.
Right.
A ditto to everything. For me, I look at those ongoing payments I've got and I kind of count them up every month and I go, and I just think, how much does that cover my overhead?
It adds up. Little payments, even from a lot of people, it adds up every month.
I'm like, that's overhead I don't have to generate. That's, things that I don't have to do this month.
It makes Fridays even more exciting because usually it's on a Friday.
Yeah. Most of the recording comes in on the Friday. So
yeah.
So people get paid, right?
Right, exactly. Because that's the big thing I always tell people is we try to set this up with how you're paid. How are you paid? Are you weekly? Are you bi-weekly? Are you semi-monthly? monthly. Like, how are you paid? Like, let's set it up so that way it's something, one less thing for you to worry about. That's how I always approach it. Let me take one less thing off your plate. Like, how can we make this so you don't have to worry about it?
Right. Okay, great. So we got the automated recurring billing payments, which just really enables the model you're describing, Because I would imagine you can't really offer that 20%. When you mentioned 20 to 25%, that would be usually of the flat fee that you're quoting for the case, right? So if it's a DUI and it's $3,500 or $2,500, whatever it might be, the 20, 25% of that would be $500 to $1,000, somewhere in that range,
Yeah.
Okay. And then that's the initial fee, and then they're on a recurring billing payment plan from there. So maybe we can just describe like a couple of different example cases. Let's say a DUI or a drug charge, whatever would be like kind of a simple example for you.
Sure.
In terms of what the fee would be, what the process is, how long it typically takes, which is one of the things that you said, that knowledge thereof of how long on average it's going to take for this type of case to work its way through the system and so forth.
Sure.
Yeah, before there's going to be an outcome. Is the time you have really to structure that relationship in terms of financially,
Yeah, so taking an example, we'll say, like, to make my math a little bit easier, I guess, we'll do an $1,800 case that I'm charging on maybe kind of a minor domestic violence case. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So $1,800 flat fee. I'm probably going to ask for somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe on that one as much as $500 up front. Again, because one of the things I'm thinking is just how to keep my math simple. Because then I know that $1,300 could be paid over 6 months, every other week, of about $100. Mm-hmm. I believe my math is working out there.
Yes.
So if I'm charging them $100 every other week, we're going to be paid off in 6 months. I know that the case where I am, that case is normally going to take 7 or 8 months to resolve.
Right. So you have a little bit of buffer of time.
Right. And so, but if I think it's going to, there's the different things that I can shift in there to make it work. I can raise or lower the payment. I can raise or lower the upfront amount.
Initial deposit,
yeah. I can make them pay me a little bit more frequently. I had standard forms that I just pushed out when I'm doing this for Clio. Mm-hmm. And so Clio Grow sends out my contracts that are adjusted for the different time periods with the amounts already in them, because essentially they're telling me what they can afford. And honestly, just to keep it simple for myself, I'm kind of backing into my own payment plans, which is usually a little bit less than what they were asking for, which I'm kind of using as a selling point. They say they can afford, $150 every other week. I'll say, well, let's do 100. I will make your budget easier. Let's do 100. And really, it's because I want to do less work on it, and I just want to be able to send them what I've already got.
Kind of a good faith.
Yeah, and they appreciate that. They understand that.
Usually, it's not the attorney asking for less money.
Right.
That's
right.
Not how that usually
again,
works.
That does not usually occur in their experience, right? So
Right.
when attorneys like, look, let's make this manageable for you,
Right.
so you can cover your bills, take care of your expenses, and so forth. This is going to put you in a difficult position.
Right.
They're like, oh wow, appreciate the courtesy,
Right. Because and people will sometimes kind of puff up their ability to do this anyway, or be overly ambitious, or not be thinking fully of their budget when they're doing it. So coming off a little bit from what they say is usually another relief to them. It makes you more on their team, and it makes them more trusting of you, which, trust isn't just to get the payment. Trust is to have a productive relationship with them from beginning to end. Because if they trust their attorney, you get less phone calls. Just frankly.
Yes.
That's true.
If they trust their attorney, you'll get recommendations. If they trust their attorney,
especially in the criminal sphere.
Yeah, they will use you for everything that they can think of, if they actually trust you.
That is true.
Right. Okay, so if we kind of broke down, you gave an example of a minor domestic violence case. So you're first determining, okay, how long is this case probably going to take?
Yeah.
Right? Step one. So you said probably like 8 to 9 months.
Sure.
Okay, so then I have and then you give yourself about a 1 or 2 month buffer in terms of the payment plan period of time.
Yeah.
To make sure if there's a missed payment here and there or something like that, you've got enough time. Is that why you give yourself the little extra time just in case something comes up and they need to put a payment on hold or something like that, hey?
Yeah.
Gives yourself a little bit of time, and then maybe it gets resolved sooner or something happens, right? It can be changes in the case. So it's thinking through, okay, how long is this going to take? Give myself a 2 month buffer, more or less, hey? Yeah. And then that gives an X amount of time, say 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I usually want to ask, say, 20 to 25% down, somewhere in that range, depending on like some different factors. Like you said, you could modify that. Let's say you have someone else that's going to be writing a check for them or something like that. Maybe they don't want to they might want to pay a little bit more upfront and then not necessarily have the payment plans at the back end, right? So you can adapt that piece of it. But generally speaking, it's that 20 to 25% calculation depending.
Right.
Okay? And then when you're doing that, we'll talk about the kind of the strategy on the consultation in terms of, how you convey this to the client, explain to them. But you kind of lead with that deposit. They then make that deposit, and then you set up the payment plan from there to have that last for that 6-month period or so, give or take, in accordance with their payment plan, in accordance with when they're getting paid.
Right.
So, right?
And sometimes there will be things that happen along the course of the case which will speed things up. I might get a dismissal on a case.
Yeah.
And sometimes that'll happen 1 or 2 months down the road. And so I have to sit down with my client and say, sorry, we resolved this earlier and better than you thought. And kind of ask
darn
for...
it, you did it again, Aaron.
Yeah, we won, darn it. Yeah. So when I'm sitting down having that conversation with them, it's going to be, okay, well, I would appreciate whatever you can pay right now. We're going to keep you on the payment plan. And normally the people who get that are thrilled, very satisfied. Yeah. And they don't want to, they're thanking me and trying to offer their firstborn children. So
you keep having people try to pay you more money afterwards. Like, can I just pay you more? You're like, no, that was
happened a couple times recently. Yeah. Yeah, people are offering me tips. I don't know. Understand what's going on.
We're going to talk about on the show next what to do when clients ask to pay you more.
Right.
Yeah, it's a problem unbundled attorneys have quite often.
It's happened a couple times recently. But but that, again, you've done the things you need to along the way. You built trust. And worst case scenario, they stop paying you and you were done with the work already. And you already probably made your hourly rate that you were looking for there if you're getting the case dismissed early. So even if you don't make 100% of the money you were promised on that, you probably made enough along the way for it all to make sense.
Right. Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about, how to approach the consultation or kind of fielding of an inbound lead for a criminal case. And obviously how this difference, we have a different model or different way in which we can provide services to the clients. And we're a little bit more limited in some ways because you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound when it comes to criminal law. And so we can't do the limited scope small lead. And so by giving them the deposit and doing the payment plan and, it enables you to, give them an offer that maybe another attorney hasn't offered and so forth, and gives them a way in which they can get started that financially might make it possible for someone that otherwise might not be able to. Okay? So, but it requires a little bit different strategy in terms of the way you approach that lead coming in and how you're going to attempt to enroll that client. So could you describe the difference in terms of what is going on for that client and how you approach that conversation? For family law, your goal was to talk to the client, get them in the office, meet them face-to-face and so forth. Just talk about how it differs in criminal law.
Sure. So when I'm talking to, the lead is coming through from Unbundled, I'm talking to that person, I'm assuming that this is high urgency every single time I'm talking to them. My imagination of the typical client is they are not going to be resolved on this issue. They are not going to feel better about what's going on until they have someone in their corner.
Right.
There's other areas of law where they will feel better because they got something done. In my experience, criminal clients usually don't feel better until they have that thing in place which will solve everything. Okay? So they're going to keep searching until they find that. So
what is that thing? The lawyer on their side?
The lawyer on their side, the plan that they've paid for.
Yes.
Okay. So my goal is to get on the phone with them, spend the time that it takes for them to understand who I am, understand the position they're in, for them to explain it to me, and then to have them enrolled and paid something on that call. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So
on that phone call.
Yes. That is, so first contact is we're talking about whatever is relevant in their case. We're treating it like an urgent matter. Mm-hmm. We're treating it like the most important thing that's happened in their entire life, because it might be. Mm-hmm. And I think of it kind of as the burning house call. They're not going to be happy until they're out of the burning house.
Yes.
So we need to get them out of the burning house, and that means I need to show up on site and show them out. Mm-hmm. And the way out in this case is hiring me for whatever that representation is. If they, so I'm having the conversation, I'm explaining the terms of representation, and I'm getting some initial payment from them, signifying their agreement to that, so that we can start working for them immediately.
Right. Was there a period at time at all where you when you made the switch from family law and you started working the criminal law leads during the beta test, that you were trying to get clients to come in the door, and then you're like, this is too urgent, and by the time they're just canceling appointments? Or did you experience that at all, or you just kind of got the sense?
Yeah, so I've worked criminal law leads for years, and so I kind of knew just even from outside Unbundled, I was brought up, enrolling them over the phone. That's how I learned to do it, and I had some success doing that. When I joined the beta test for the criminal leads, I did try to do like the most unbundled thing that I could imagine on both the financial side and on the scheduling side. So I was trying to get people into the office, being like, let's go all in, let's just do this. And getting people in the office at that point, I was totally aware that they were not stopping calling through the phone book in order to find help. And so,
where I suppose in family law, it stops the shop, so to speak.
Yeah, it usually does.
They make contact with an attorney. They have an appointment. It's today's Tuesday, and they have an appointment on Thursday. They're not going to call 10 other lawyers with me now on Thursday. Like, okay, great, I got an appointment scheduled.
Right.
I'm looking forward to meeting you. So I'll see you then.
Yeah.
Right? You get off the phone with that criminal client for that Thursday appointment. By the time Thursday rolls around, if it does, with that appointment, they've already talked to 9 other attorneys. And
yes,
yeah.
And with the competitive landscape, what it is, all those other attorneys have quoted them over the phone. Someone has found a plan for them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the idea is put a workable plan in front of them before other leads do.
Right.
That's the most secure thing you can do. Obviously, there's a lot of things you're looking to do on that phone call, but I mean, urgency is the name of the game.
Right.
Treating it as urgent, getting to them like it's urgent. You can get them to hold off on a little while, but for the most part, you need to get in there and show them that you are immediately responsive to them.
Mm. And so that also means being like calling the lead in real time, or engineering your firm to be able to respond in real time,
right? Or
get the live transfer or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So whenever
possible, obviously.
Yeah. So the general structure is, if you can have the live transfer, you do the live transfer. If not that, then I'm going to be calling them or texting them immediately, letting them know I'm here now, or I'm here in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. If not me, then it's going to be someone else who's answering the phone and letting them know the same thing. And hopefully, if nothing else, talking to that person until I'm available. We can engineer an intake until, that 5 or 10 minutes until I'm on the phone, and then do the transfer, and I can start handling it from there.
Yeah.
So any way to, fill in the time between here and whenever they'd be making the call to the next attorney.
Yeah, to like keep the attention, so to speak, eh?
Yeah.
Gosh, it reminds me of, back in the day when the personal injury lawyers, we had lawyers that did family law and personal injury, and they would say when they got a car accident lead come in, they would just keep that person on the phone, asking questions and so forth, until they could get an attorney over. And then sometimes when the attorney was on the phone with them, they would be like sending a runner to go meet the client, and like get the sign. I don't know if they can't do that anymore or whatever, but it's a testament to how urgent of a situation it is for the client in terms of how much of a life event it is. If I originally moved here from Canada, right? And I can imagine as an immigrant, if they got served paperwork that you're getting deported or something like that, or you got this criminal charge that's happening, like your whole life stops, right? You got this second DUI or something like that. Now you're looking at losing your job potentially and jail time and so forth.
Right.
Everything's no longer on the table, right? Like everything that mattered before that moment didn't matter nearly as much as it does now in resolving this thing now, right? And so it's just and by treating it that way, you're also empathizing with the situation for the client, and getting that world that they're dealing with, and being responsive in that way communicates to them that you do get how important this is for them, and that you're giving it attention it deserves now.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And the urgency, even if their case isn't a big deal, the urgency is an illusion. It's absolutely real to them. And it's the situation they're living in right then and there. And so if you can't mirror that back to them at least a little bit and say, yes, yeah, I'm there with you. And there's a plan that I've got to help you get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You need to be in there in that space with them and be able to deliver something like that so that they know what you're doing, know that you can take care of them. Probably, I mean, you engender trust like no one else. I probably make people feel more comfortable. Like that's what I'm trying to do on the phone is give them a sense of great comfort.
Maybe confidence.
Yeah.
Would be a different, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
In terms of my experience of both of you, it's like I feel really heard, understood, empathized with. I think that's more of your style. So I feel very comfortable.
Right.
Whereas when I've heard you do calls, it's more of like, this guy is sharp as a tack. He knows the situation I'm in. He's an expert in this, and he's going to solve this for me. And so, like, it instills a lot of confidence in that regard because it's the sharpness.
Because I think you're pretty good about pinpointing exactly what they like need. You're talking about the plan. I feel like you're usually, because I've heard your calls, like you're usually pretty good about finding whatever it is that's going to make them feel better and kind of zeroing in on that. You're much more strategic on kind of how you go through that call versus I'm a little more like, a little more relational, maybe. For lack of a term, you are more like, no, how can we help? This is the best way to do that. Here's the plan. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I try to be comforting at least.
Well, you are. I think you are comforting in your plan. I just think.
I felt like I was wearing a cardigan.
Well,
I know.
If
It's just
I'm
a little more
confident in your
formal.
representation, I feel comfortable. Right?
Yeah,
I'm like,
true.
Thank God, this guy's got my back. I want this is the guy that's got my back. I feel great about that now.
Yeah.
So the effect is I'm super comfortable because I've got a great expert that I can have confidence in.
Yeah.
Right.
So you arrive through different.
Yes. Yeah. There's different
different
tactics.
styles.
Yeah. Right. But no, it works though.
Different strokes. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about how you would arrive at that arrangement, because like there's different ways to try to figure out, well, what is that right deposit? What is that payment plan? And I think a lot of attorneys, when they get on a call, they're like, well, how much could I get as a deposit?
Sure.
As opposed to just kind of like doing the math and being like, here's my fee for the deposit. Here's the flat fee. Here's what you can pay as a deposit. Here's the payment plan and so forth. And just going right to what that bottom number is you can do just to get someone started and give them an offer that's, so much better than anyone else, because you're leveraging the plan and the automated recurring billing, and that your business model supports that. Okay.
Right.
Back in, like, you can have confidence offering this number here, and so I'll offer it. So maybe that's your approach, maybe it's not. I'd be curious to hear like how you, once you've kind of talked to them about what's going on with their situation, had them explain what's going on, what does it really come down to? Here's what needs to be done. Okay, so let's talk about how we can get this taken care of financially for you. Just take us through how you would approach that conversation to arrive at the deposit and the payment plans that you do.
So I think it's good to know the starting point, which is there's two standard. If you ask most criminal attorneys, there's two arrangements that exist. One is you pay me everything now, and the other is you pay me half now, and you pay me the rest of it real soon.
Correct.
Those are the two that exist. And so if they've reached
it up to this point,
right?
Well, and
majority,
so everyone else they're talking to is presenting one of those.
Yes, I'll talk about the Spade test here in a second, because it was perfect example of the two models and the numbers.
Yeah, everyone else is offering that. If they've talked to another attorney before you, that's what they were offered, and they, by calling around, said no. That's not what they want to do. Mm-hmm. So if that's your base assumption, that they've already said no to that offer, then you should come in at something that's better than that.
Or if you get to someone first and they haven't, but then they may go talk to one or two other people and they go, oh, I don't want that. That's just way better here. I had the diamond in the hand.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people come back around because they're like, oh wait, I thought that was expensive. I no longer think that was expensive anymore.
So once you know that, so you can, and again, if you're talking about these things in the right term, it's not all about the end number. It's about what they can afford. Yes. Attorneys often try to sell legal services like they sell cars, which is you're just going to pay for the whole thing. You're just buying the entire thing when most people need a ride. And so you're just saying, no, like, can I give you a ride, 10 times? That's really what you need. And you just pay me for that as we go versus buying a new car. Uh-huh. So if you can make 10 payments or you can make 20 payments, and that's kind of the range that we're talking about here. What do those payments need to be for this case to make sense? So when I'm still a fan of getting more upfront on most cases. And so I'm asking probing questions along the way.
Yes. So do you keep yours open-ended, or do you come in saying you ask for half?
I walk the line depending on what's going on, because when I'm talking to them about it, I'm saying, I'm asking the intake questions to go with this too. One of the things I like to ask is, I want to know if this is going to interfere with going to court is going to interfere with your abilities to maintain your lifestyle. Where do you work?
Yep.
Okay. Because some people can go to court and some people can't. And it makes a difference. And I can normally keep people out of court. It's one of the, benefits of being a criminal defense attorney is you can keep people working. Yes. And so that's part of the pitch when I'm talking to them is I can keep you working among uncertainty. Okay. Yes. And you won't have to worry about court interfering with your life as much or those things.
And then you can identify income, job type.
Right. And so I'm getting a little bit of information from that. I'm finding out probably what their work hours are. I'm probably, able to, what kind of work is that? Okay. And figure out a little bit about what's going on there. That's helping me price things. At some point along, late in the conversation, I'm going to ask the question, okay, just be honest with me. You didn't plan for this. Do you feel like you have resources that will allow you to afford the services of an attorney? We're going to keep talking, but I just need to know, what do you have set aside for this? And it's okay if you don't have anything set aside, but I need to know. Okay. And then have that conversation with them, but doing it in a trustful place. And then from there saying, okay, well, let's talk about your starting point, wherever that is. And let's talk about what I can do to work from there. And so that's when we're talking about whatever my minimum amount is, because there always is going to be a floor. There's going to be some kind of floor in there. Yes. Let's talk about how we can get to that floor and then what the payments will be after that. Okay. And that doesn't mean I won't take payments along the way to get to the floor and then start them on the normal payment plan after that. But my representation doesn't start until the floor. And I'm doing that so that they can feel like they can do something about it today still, so that we can calendar it so it'll make sense with whatever was going on in their case. Because sometimes they have, 2 months before their hearing comes up. And so it's still working with that time frame, but they can do something about it today. I used to, years ago say, oh, well, see if you can pay me right before the hearing. And that's one approach. And some of those people do come back. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to get in your case. Contact me 2 days before the hearing and we'll figure it out. Some of those people come back, but a lot of them don't. If they put $10 in your pocket, they're going to remember that.
Yes.
Okay. And so that is truly what happens to stop the shop.
Once the payment is made.
Once
Instead of sitting on your couch.
Right.
Once they have Saul Goodman put $1 in your pocket, that's it. That is, they are your client and you are their lawyer. Even if that formalized part hasn't happened down the road yet, to make it so that you are going to represent them on this case, so you have to be clear about the arrangement with them, but once they start paying up, that's when you've got this a relationship that shows promise of lasting.
How is it that you determine? Can you describe what you mean by the floor and what that is determined based on?
Yeah. So the floor is, and I'll talk to them directly about what that number is on the phone. But it's basically, I've got my total flat fee, and we've got some number much lower than that, which might be the 20 or 25% mark. And that's the number that we need them to get up to before it's going to be the representation. I am taking their payments as a convenience and just putting them in trust up to that point. But once we hit that threshold, okay, now we're going to rip the cord. Okay, now we've got this. And my appearance is in, and we'll start working their case.
Okay, so that is a certain amount of funds that you would need in order to enter the appearance of the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, and we're not talking anything that would take them, 6 months to pay in or anything. We're looking at, 3 or 4 weeks. Okay. Right. But them getting some money into you is still the sign that if they're going to hire an attorney, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's how they're going to feel about it too. If I'm going to hire any attorney, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the establishment of the relationships that the payments are going to take place in.
Mm-hmm. Could you give an example of floor and payment plans for a DUI?
Okay, so yeah,
first time DUI.
Yeah, so first time DUI, we'll say 2,200. So the floor on that might be, we'll say 500.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
that's again that 20-25%.
Yeah, it's somewhere. It's in there. So we're doing 500. They have to get to that amount. Most of the people I've talked to, they'd be able to get there very quickly. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're gonna throw it on a credit card and they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people it might take 2 or 3 weeks to get there. Okay, fine. It still saves them. Again, we're talking about the kind of emotional part of this. They don't want to look for another attorney if they can
Mm-hmm.
avoid it. They don't want to feel like they're getting cheated. They don't want to feel like this is a bad deal, but they also don't want to look for another attorney if they can avoid it.
Yeah.
So allowing them that opportunity to say, here's the plan so that you're done. We just need to finish this part of it. Means that, once we hit that 500 number, then we're going to be on regular payment plans, maybe continue on the exact same that we were on to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe something a little bit lower depending on the span of the case.
Right. How do you manage anything that may arise? And I would imagine this is the same with family law. Anytime you're offering kind of a layaway on a limited scope, right? That things haven't been filed yet, but there is a representation agreement signed and so forth. Do you act at that point, like if they're getting questioned or something happening or so forth, that you're speaking for them and that you're now their attorney, but you just, or like, how do you manage that balance between giving them a layaway? Because, for example, when someone's the petitioner, you can much easier lay away the initial petition because,
Sure.
Yeah, they want to file for custody and they want to get something established,
Mm-hmm.
but they need to come up with the resources to do so. So then, they may not be able to file as quickly as they want, but that's a limitation of their financial capacity. And it's much better for them to wait a little bit to get the representation and the help they need than to try to file on their own without this help they
Sure.
need. So they wait, right? That's not always, they can't do that if they're getting a response, right?
Right.
You got to figure out, do you have this amount now because we need to do a response? So is that a factor as well in a criminal case where sometimes you can do that little bit of time to lead up versus other times you got to just go?
Yeah. So, you're going to be talking to them about what that period of time looks like. And if it's an OWI case, they might be facing a license suspension during that period of time. And that's just something they got to know about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't necessarily do anything about it because you're not in the case. And for us, it's something that would probably automatically happen anyway, depending on, the other facts or circumstances that are there. Or it's possible that they're going to be reapproached by police. It's pretty rare, at least where we're dealing with. And I'm going to give them the one-off advice at every criminal defense attorney, which would be just don't talk to police.
Yeah.
Just shut up.
Yeah, don't say anything. Fifth Amendment, done. So I haven't had any situations where anything has arisen in there that has required kind of an interruption of that. In the meantime, I'm basically just putting the funds in trust and I'm holding it on their behalf. Theoretically, if they wanted the money back, they're going to get it back because that's what I'm doing for them. But at the same time, I'm not going to take those funds as earned until I'm actually starting representation and putting an appearance in.
And do you put it, I know I put mine in my attorney-client agreements too, that representation does not begin. I will not enter my appearance until this.
Mm.
And then even this just came up because it got flagged in the case where now our automatic emails that go out with all of our agreements say in really big bold letters, our representation does not begin until we have the signed service agreement back. Mm-hmm. And your first payment as outlined in your agreement.
Right.
And so just so there's no question, you could pay us. That's great. I'm not going to do anything with that money until you've signed that service agreement though. And it's a two-part, you can't do one without the other.
Right.
Because, that protects us as attorneys later when people try to come back and try to say, well, that wasn't the deal. Absolutely it was. It was very clearly outlined. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming you probably outlined that in your agreement, when representation starts. Right.
It's very clear in paragraph 2 of my attorney-client agreement. That's all systematized through Clio Grow. And then it also with that, when I'm sending it out, I'm also sending out the document so we can set up their payment plan. So all of that's getting done all at once.
Right. So once you reach this floor number, that I enter my appearance and the representation is completed. Okay.
Yeah.
This is really helpful to just kind of itemize this in terms of the balance between extending services and flexibility in terms of the rate, but also making sure that the boundary is clear in terms of when that representation really begins.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, and a lot of things will happen during that period of time. So sometimes something will change in their life. Like another case will come up and they'll get arrested and they're not going to be able to afford you on that case. And you'll go, I'm sorry, I'll give you that little bit of money back. But, it's part of it is the figuring out financial solutions for people and just being compassionate for them in that. Mm-hmm. And people will still want you and respect you. And I've had situations like that have come up, and then the people came back and hired me later because they did get it.
Yes.
And so, if you're actually building, using these opportunities with people to build out relationships with them so that they know that you can be trusted with their money. Yeah. The thing that in a lot of cases they're most afraid of losing or being screwed with, then they're going to come back and they're going to use you if they possibly can.
Yes. Right. Okay. And so this is the, on the flip side of this coin, because we're kind of talking about, well, here's kind of the kind of the legal aspects of making sure we put the fee agreement this way, and this is the structure and so forth in terms of the initiation of the relationship and the model. But on the flip side of this, I think it's interesting just to describe what we were talking about here in terms of pay me all up front or pay me half down and then the rest in payments are as soon as possible versus what you're describing. And the way that penciled out in the beta test when we first launched criminal leads, we always test any new practice area of leads that we ever launch with 3, 4, 5 different unbundled attorneys we worked with for a long time that have experience, and we just go, okay, here's these leads. Okay, and we give feedback. Here's we adopt the campaigns, we try again, and so forth until we get the highest converting lead in the legal industry. I mean, that's what we're committed to. And so one of the things that we found is between unbundled attorneys, there was a big difference in conversion rate of the same leads. Right? Well, what was the deal? Well, a couple of the lawyers that we worked with were doing, okay, it's $2,500 or $3,500 or $4,000. Just pay me half down, and then we'll set you up on a payment plan for the balance. Right? Conversion rate on the criminal leads for those two attorneys, and granted they were brand new on fielding leads, and so we're still learning how to work this model, was about 1 out of 10. Okay. Do you remember what your conversion rate is when you were doing your model?
I don't remember.
I think it was about 30 to 40%.
Okay.
You were like, I think every second or third lead you were retaining into services. Some of them were pretty good cases too, like bigger types of matters than just the DUIs. And your model was, okay, 2,500, $500 or so, right? 2,200, right?
Yeah.
$500 or so. If it was 4,000, maybe about 1,000 or so. And then depending on the circumstances, like you're describing and figuring out what works best, and then $100 a week or $100 every other week. Or I heard $50 a week. Yeah. $50 every other week sometimes, depending on the length of the case and how much was required to be paid. Again, 6 months, they have $1,000 more owed. Okay, it's this. So you could do $50 a week, right? And so, if we look at, okay, if we sent you 20 clients, right? The other two attorneys retained maybe 2. And if the client value was $4,000 each, they made about $8,000 of that 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
We send you the same 20 clients, you enroll 6 or 7 of them for a $4,000 average client value. What's 4,000 times 7? 28,000?
28,000, yeah.
20,000, right? So everyone just saw us try to do math, and it didn't work well. All right. It's like 4 times as much. Yeah. Right? It's a much bigger number.
Yeah.
It's 25,000 versus 8. Okay. And so will some folks may get started maybe now and again and can't keep going? Yeah. Will folks run out of money or things? Maybe you don't get paid the full amount on a certain case. Sometimes. Okay?
Sure.
I'd be curious to see now that you've been running this model for a long time. Like, what are the numbers in terms of just generally speaking? How many times folks don't end up being able to pay the full amount versus how many times they do and it works out right? I mean, like, I don't know how you to look forward a bit from like,
sure.
Okay, I enrolled these clients in this model. What happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too emotionally attached to the number, so I think it's in the neighborhood of probably 80%. Probably.
I say your accounts receivable is normally pretty low.
Yeah, I keep it pretty
the
low.
hourly cases where our AR gets a little sometimes out of control. But I feel like you usually are pretty good about collecting on yours.
Yeah, I mean, just having the.
Because it's amazing how when you all of a sudden you say, "Hey, you're not paying. I'm gonna get out of your case," and they're like, "No, let me pay you."
Yeah, and so probably not less than 80% of the whatever I billed on those got collected, or is in the process of being collected still.
Yeah, which is a good rate.
Right.
It's not write off.
I would imagine that's much different than a standard criminal firm that does the half down. It's pretty similar. Because of the recurring billing type of model, it's like if they can afford it, they can afford it. Okay?
Right.
Well, and one thing I feel like that was really nice too, like in this era of COVID, and people's jobs fluctuating, and you might quarantine for 2 weeks or with those kinds of things. And like last year, I know all of us attorneys panicked because if our clients don't have jobs, if they're not doing these things, how in the world are we going to make money? But I feel like the payment plans came in pretty clutch last year because it was smaller chunks, and so even if the firm had a down month because no one had the money to pay for an attorney, that like revenue stream even after the cases may have been resolved was huge. And just being able to be willing to work with people to do that, I think has been super, super helpful, and it has made it so that people are better about paying your bills.
Right. I mean, I think it's true of most people. If you walk up to pretty much anyone and say, "I need $5,000 from you right now," versus "I need $100 a week from you for a year," you're gonna like 1 out of 20 people is gonna have $5,000 now.
Yeah, less than
that. And half of them are gonna have $100 a week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just plain like numbers and access. Like, it is what people can do.
Yes.
So it makes it easy to tap that asset.
I mean, I don't think you can put it any more clearly than that. When we talk about giving accessibility to the legal services, what can people do? Like that's really all we're trying to figure out. Yeah. And can we make that work?
Right.
Yeah. We're like, I can deliver services for that because either because we've got automated recurring billing and we can pencil that out and it works out in terms of the amount of time that we're putting into each case and it's a flat rate, or we can manage that, or we're doing limited scope, whatever it might be. And then I can make it more efficient in these ways and so forth. Okay, I can do that. And then there's that floor where it's like, okay, I can't do that, right? Yeah. There's no silver bullet to like helping other than legal aid, obviously. That's not really a silver bullet per se, but they have the public defender system. But this is about providing, private, legal services to folks that otherwise would never have an opportunity to have a private lawyer representing them in a criminal matter, in a family law case, and having that representation where they would otherwise in family law cases be completely going it alone in the vast majority of circumstances. And in the criminal sector, it would be a public defender. And that isn't necessarily always going to work out to be the most ideal scenario for that individual, just from a resources standpoint, okay? In terms of like the public defenders, how many cases they have to deal with and so forth, right? The representation of the strategy, the approach may be different, right? In terms of what they have the capacity to do. And so it's really trying to figure out, well, what can the average person do that's middle income, like single parents. I grew up with a single parent, 2 kids, right? Like, she didn't even have the funds to hire the lawyer to file for the child support and didn't realize that there was an attorney. This is up in Canada. Didn't even realize that she could do it. Right. That she could just go through the state, the province and so forth. And so she didn't. Right. Yeah. And so, but could she have done I actually sat down with her as an anecdote, a few weeks ago. And I was like, well, describe to me, like, you never went after dad for this and that. Like, and she was like, yeah, he got my lawyer that we've both been using. And, I didn't have very much money. And so I just let it go. So, well, if you had a lawyer that was $100 a week and $500, would you have done it? And she's like, kind of think about it. Yeah, I probably would have if I'd had access to that. Right. Okay? That's a single mom with 2 kids. Yeah. Right. What can people like that, average folks do? They can do that. Right. And that makes the difference. Yeah. For a lot of folks. Okay?
Absolutely. Because I think there's a big market. And I think that's like when people come to me and ask me for advice on either going out on their own or just those kinds of things, there is a big gap. And there's a lot of people in that gap of they don't qualify for free legal services and they by no means are independently wealthy. And the attorneys are really, I feel like, doing a disservice to themselves because you're knocking out a significant portion, at least around here, even though we have some really wealthy areas in Indianapolis, there's a lot of people that are in that lower middle class to like low income level, but they still are over that threshold where they don't qualify. And so how in the world can like they have a right to representation and good representation? Like they shouldn't have to hire somebody who's not good quality just because they can't afford it. So I feel like there's actually a lot of money to be made if you can get them on those payment plans. And oftentimes, again, I feel like as long as they're paying consistently, they've got skin in the game, because I feel like so oftentimes attorneys are worried about doing that because it's like, well, then like they have no incentive. It's like, no, they do. Like that's a lot of money to them. Like it may not be to you, lawyer, that's quoting that, but it is to them. And so as long as they're trying, can't you do the same? Because I do think there's a big market there that's just underserved, which is the nice thing about Unbundled too, because I think is doing those lower payments but consistent payments lets them actually have access to that. And I feel like family law world, we fall into that a lot, because a lot of times people are like, everybody's quoting me $3,500 for a retainer. It's like, I could quote you that, but I know that you can't do that, so that doesn't you nor I any good. So yeah.
Well, the question is that really necessary?
It's not. It makes us attorneys feel better because then our trust accounts look nice and healthy. But at the same time, you have how many less clients because of that. So
could you guys describe in whatever way you can, in terms of, because I think that is partly the misnomer, is that attorneys might think, well, if I take less up front, and take $1,000 or $1,500 or $500, then I'm not going to make that back end, and I'll make less money, right? I get, it's got to be the only real. When it comes down to it, like, why am I not doing this? Well, because I need to get the money up front because they may not pay me and so forth, right?
Right.
I may make less, right?
Right.
When in reality, because it opens the door to so many other folks, like it was in the beta test, instead of 1 or 2 out of 20, it was like 7. And then we know what the average client value of those folks are. It's a completely different model, a completely different equation, hey, in terms of what you were able to net. Just in real line ground terms, in terms of when you began offering this type of more, payment plan, smaller deposit and so forth, or for you when you were doing this in criminal law, how it impacted your guys' practice financially?
Well, I can say, because I looked at my numbers in preparation for this, because I was curious, because I hadn't really run them. Like, what was my build time last year versus this? And I'm over 100,000 more this year in my build time than I was last year. We started Unbundled almost a year ago today. Actually, it's the 9th of December, I think, is when we started. And so that was a huge jump in just my billable time. My collections rate's also higher than it was a year ago, which I think that's a multitude of factors as to why that's a little bit higher. But like when I just look at our general revenue, like over the last year, we lost a partner who left. And so like, obviously that's one less billing partner than at that point. But when I look at our revenue numbers, like they're really actually not that different. And I have to credit, I think, Unbundled for a lot of that because of just the sheer number of clients that we've been getting, and then that are on those payment plans. Because like I was saying earlier, like our accounts receivable is a huge problem in the family law industry. And we are no exception of that. Like we definitely have a pretty big accounts receivable too. But I think our collections rate this year is much better than it had been in past. And I do think a lot of that's just those payment plans.
Auto draft.
It's the auto draft, absolutely.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we've got and like, again, it's like a daily thing for me. If I see a payment decline, I'm sending my staff a reminder of like, hey, call the client. If we need to reduce it, let's reduce it. I don't care if it's $25 every other week. I just want payments coming in, like whatever it needs to happen so that it's not declining. Like that's what we need to make happen. So, but it's made a big jump in both just the amount of time I'm able to bill, and then also our AR is down this year, which is good.
I would imagine probably the number of clients you've been able to extend services to.
Yeah.
Because you just don't have to turn as many folks away because you have a solution that's a little bit more accessible for them.
Yeah, and luckily with some of Aaron's help too, because he's really good at the automation stuff, we've been able to automate a bunch of stuff too over the last year, which has also made it I think the quality of the work better too, because I think there was in that growth phase, it's hard to make sure that you're getting everything done timely. And so being able to have some of those automation things done so that people can see things faster in terms of drafting of things has been huge too.
Just the timelines of getting
because that's always the hard part, right? With growth is then all of a sudden you've got this new influx of cases, and now what do I do with them? Because there's only one of me. Obviously some people have staff and some don't. I do luckily have awesome staff, but there's still that allocation of workload. And I carry probably a heavier caseload than most, which hopefully that's going to be changing so I can offset some of that to our new associate. But yeah, so it's been a big help in just terms of just general client intake. I'm very busy, so that's a good thing. So.
Great. Aaron, anything you want to add on that, just in terms of the financial side?
I was not as good a student, so I didn't look up all my numbers before I came.
Well,
but
I always
felt
find it
very
interesting,
comfortable.
like when people come on the show, they're like, I better have my numbers ready. And it's like, well,
yeah.
Well, it's just good. It's good introspective. Like, I'm just like, oh, like I haven't really looked at how that did impact the practice. And so it was really interesting to.
I knew that I was very comfortable with the number of cases I was signing from Unbundled, and I just kind of did the work.
Well,
and
you were meeting your financial goals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was getting busy enough in those times that I was bringing on extra people, either on a full-time or part-time basis or contract basis to get the work done, because I had too much paid work to do.
Yeah, and like going back a little bit too, because I think one thing you did a really good job of, and I've kind of piggybacked from that, is if you can make the intake process as seamless as possible, and then the workflow after that too, that helps keep the clients better too. Because I feel like part of our growing pains with it was making sure we were getting people scheduled timely and efficiently. So because obviously the conversion rate's the big thing. It's like, yes, the leads can come to us. They might be really great quality leads, but I got to convert them and I got to get to them in time and those kinds of things. And I don't know, like we luckily had put in place a client management, like retention management, a CRM system. We use Clio Grow.
Yep.
How I did it before that, I'm not sure. I don't even remember how that operated, but I feel like we've done a really good job. You did, and I kind of piggybacked it from it, was just having those systems in place, because that's the big thing with Unbundled too, is we can get really good leads, but you've got to have all that, I feel like, in place to kind of maximize those leads.
To maximize it, yes.
Yeah, because like we had, when I saw
the templates, the emails, responses.
Yes, and because like when I saw our retention rate go down, it's always just, it's not because we aren't, like we're getting them scheduled or we're doing the things we need to, but it's because we aren't following up like we should be, because we didn't have a good follow-up procedure put in place, or those kinds of things. So as long as that like process is there, I feel like it's worked really, really well. And when it's fallen off the wheels at all, it's just because usually we didn't have a good process to make sure those clients were getting help as fast as we could get to them. So, but yeah, the automation is key.
Great. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I'm really glad that we got an opportunity to get the show rolling again and have an opportunity to sit down with you guys. I couldn't be more excited about, there was a long period of time where, most people know that, we've had a lot of lawyers ask us about personal injury leads, and and the reason we haven't gone into, some of these other practice areas is there's no access to justice problem in car accidents. It's like, you need a lawyer, you got a car accident, you'll have 10 lawyers down the street ready to take your case. Hey?
Yeah.
There is an access to justice problem in family law, in probate, in criminal, in, immigration, right? In these practice areas in bankruptcy, right? Where you got to come up with money to figure out a solution. And usually it's a lot, right? And for a long time, we didn't see how it is that criminal lawyers could work with clients where they could give them access to private representation without having to charge them a bundle, because you couldn't do limited scope. You couldn't do unbundled services in the traditional sense like you can with family law.
Right.
Okay. And so, being able to work with attorneys like yourself that, are willing, that have kind of thought through the model, looked at the ways in which, how much time you have to work with, I think is the biggest asset with criminal, is it just takes some time sometimes to let these things roll out. And so you can kind of extend out, kind of give clients more flexible timelines in which they can take these fees and to pay the fee, whatever is involved, and do that math and come up and then have the automated payment solution in place to make it so that you're not having to manually do those things, right? Because of the administrative side of it, getting the client staff to do it, right? That really is a linchpin to the model.
Absolutely.
Right? And again, like a lot of credit goes to, John and Amy Porter, the original founders of LawPay, and for their pioneering work with a payment processing solution in the legal industry,
right,
to give that powerful platform, make that available through Clio Payments or through LawPay.
Because there's just not enough time otherwise to do that manually. I don't know how people would do that.
How would you be processing, 50 clients every Friday?
Not well is the answer. Yeah.
Probably miss a few.
Yes.
Right? And so it's really encouraging, because, and that's expressed in that right from the day one of that beta test. It's like, wow, like you can do half down in payments from there. You might help 1 out of 10 clients, maybe 1 out of 20, right? By just doing that, and maybe like 1 out of 20, 1 out of 25, it's 5,000. Well, just by doing half down, maybe you get 1 or 2. Well, now if we, bring something that's more like, hey, maybe $500 and $100 a week or something like that, now you're getting a three or four-fold increase. 6, 7, 8 clients being able to hire you that otherwise wouldn't, right? And what that's a disparity between what people that are getting legal services that otherwise may not have, or have gone a different pouch that they may or not be able to afford, right? And even from a competitive standpoint, as a lawyer, you're also, even if it could necessarily do the more attractive solution, it's a very strong competitive advantage for you.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a big selling point.
Set your firm apart, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I'll use that in my pitch a lot of times too. Like, and when we get to the fees part, I'll be like, hey, one thing we do differently than I think most firms is, and I kind of go into it, because I think you can wrap that very easily into kind of like the missional part of it. Like, we think that you're entitled to good representation, even if you don't make $1 million a year. Heck, if you don't even make $80,000 a year, like, you're just that lower, middle class. And I think that that's something that you can try to say sets you apart.
Yes.
Which is kind of nice because just a lot of people don't do it. It is because there's also, I feel like you fight that kind of old school mentality you see so oftentimes because everyone's been trained in the same model. And so when they call, like you were saying earlier, like 3 other places, they're going to be getting similar quotes. So I feel like it also helps you with that connection level too of, we're trying to help you, and here's one way that we're able to do that, and gives some of that trust and stuff that you were trying to look for to make them stay.
That's right. Yeah. And hopefully makes you feel a little bit better about the work that you're doing for folks.
Right.
Too.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why we do it.
Most days. Some days.
Yeah.
Some days.
Most days.
Except for those days. Those other days.
We all got those days. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Anything else before we wrap up for tonight that you want to share before we sign off for the evening?
No, I got nothing.
I don't think so. I think that's it. I think I've said probably more than enough, but
cool. Well, like I said, it's I appreciate the work that both of y'all are doing to help folks in a way that they may not otherwise be able to get, and that makes a big difference in terms of ways that we may never even know
right.
like how that impacts those families and the kids that you serve and the individuals that are faced with these types of charges or different types of legal circumstances and what that makes possible for them in their lives. But that's for the universe to determine, but you guys are certainly opening the doors of opportunity for them in many ways that they wouldn't otherwise be able to step through. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing and appreciate you being part of this community and applying these and teaching us, ways in which that we can educate other attorneys on ways in which we can help more people and build very successful practices doing it.
Right.
Okay. And to all of you that are following the podcast, like I said, we're happy to be back in action, and we've got some more interviews from all over the country coming up here pretty soon. We're really happy to be back on the road and interviewing awesome attorneys like this that are providing services in these ways. So we really appreciate you tuning in, taking notes, learning all about how to build a more profitable practice while serving clients in an affordable way. And we'll certainly look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. For more information about how our exclusive Unbundled Leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com. You can watch each new episode of the podcast on the Unbundled Attorney YouTube channel, or if you prefer to listen, you can find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And be sure to subscribe so you get each new episode as soon as it's available. And remember to leave us your review on iTunes. We read each and every one of them and really appreciate your support of the show. Once again, thanks for listening.